Welcome to the SparkCom Podcast. I am Manny.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
And during our show, we talk about trends, disruptive innovation, and the things that happen in the market that affect our businesses. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing well. And how about you, Manny?
Doing grand. I wanted to talk about a subject that has some people sort of on edge, and depending on your politics, you may or may not be for what's happening in this industry. But there's an overwhelming trend and momentum is building and has been building for a number of years for our good old friend, cannabis. So I read this morning that 25 million Americans have used cannabis within the last year. That's a huge number. I had no idea it was that big. But
yeah, especially when you consider, we're talking 8-9% of the population, and we still have well over 50% of the geography for sure where the product's not even legal.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that because it really, if you think about the industry as a whole, they've really had to be innovative on how they produce, distribute, sell, monetize, all within an ever-shifting landscape of government regulations and bank regulations. And it's really, really a very interesting topic, no matter what side of the aisle you subscribe to, but nonetheless, it is something we should consider. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that this morning, Adam.
Sure. Well, as you said, the marijuana business has been around for, 100 years. The issue was that the production and distribution of the product was illegal. And so the industry built up around illegal behaviors, which were constantly under attack by the legal authorities for the right reasons, right? And then we saw legalization happen. And when legalization happened, it turned the industry upside down because now all those illegal production facilities and the illegal transportation facilities and the illegal distribution facilities were no longer necessary. And there wasn't enough value in it to keep those illegal distribution methods alive. So what we saw was the emergence. You had a choice then. Either the old-time players had to convert and become the new-time players, or new guys had to emerge. Well, the old-time players, a lot of them couldn't get licenses because they were felons. So when they went to apply for a license, they couldn't get one. So we saw an emergence of a whole new stream of entrepreneurs that jumped into the business. There's certainly an unmet need, as the product's been around for 100 years or more in the United States, and people have been willing to risk going to jail to be part of the industry. So there's clearly a need for the product, and but it puts an interesting light on the entrepreneurs that want to get into the business, I think.
Yeah, and I've had some discussions with several entrepreneurs that are part of the value chain of the production, distribution of the product, and they all have either a science background or a MBA. I mean, these are people that are looking at this as an emerging economy and not necessarily a passion for the product. That's not the case everywhere, but one of the people that I spoke with, his operation is one of the largest in Arizona, and he's done it all basically running and bootstrapping and running like a cash business. When he first started doing what he was doing, the banks did not allow him to use any cash or any of their services. So he had to basically use cash.
Right.
So buying buildings and buying $50,000 equipment, with a bag of cash.
Yep.
And one thing I've seen as well is the not quite the mainstream media, but it's becoming much more accepted. If you look at if you open the newspaper or look online, there's more and more people that are gravitating towards that. How do you see the popularity, like we said, has been around for 100 years? How do you see that in contrast with some of the governments that are still, still illegal on a federal level? What is it going to take for this to bust out and be fully mainstream?
Well, obviously, the industry is going to grow a lot faster if we remove the federal laws that interfere with the state laws. And then it's going to also grow a lot faster if the state laws start to get a little closer in conformity. I mean, today we have some that require that you have a doctor's permission to use the product. So we'd like to see that get a little more conformity. But I think what's really interesting about this for an entrepreneur is that in most of the entrepreneurial situations, we're talking about somebody discovering an unmet need. You know, they come up with a new solution that addresses an unmet need. In this case, the product is known and the need is known. And so we have a lot of entrepreneurs that want to jump on the opportunity very quickly. But the problem here is obviously the regulation, what you're mentioning. And that hurdle is actually pretty high, because you said the fellow you were talking to in Arizona was bootstrapping his business. Well, let's back up from that. You know, not many people would consider a $50,000 equipment purchase bootstrapping, or perhaps an investment in a $10,000 or $20,000 per month rent for a dispensary. That's a lot of money. And, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs get started with a lot less. But here you have to have a good deal of money, and you're in a world in which you have to be very careful about how you raise money, because the rules for raising money are at the federal level and administered by the SEC. And so you have to say, well, okay, can I sell stock in this company, right? Is that legal? Is it illegal? And who would my investors be? And are they going to get in trouble for investing? And as you said, when they invest the money, how do they invest the money? Because this is, you know, we can't run any of this money can't run through a federal bank, because it breaks federal interstate banking statutes. So it actually creates a very, very high bar for the entrepreneur. And so while it looks like it's really simple up front, you know, it's kind of like, oh, hey, look, let's get into this business, which is kind of what happened with alcohol. You know, alcohol was outlawed by prohibition, and then they repealed the amendment that created prohibition. But what happened was people could immediately get into the market and start selling. And it took years before all the taxation came along and a lot of the restrictions came along. And the restrictions were largely built around the taxation, trying to collect the taxation. In this case, the government got the taxation first. You know, we're going to charge you up front for a license. In Illinois, for example, I believe the fee is $100,000 that you have to put up to apply for a dispensary license. And if you don't get it, you forfeit the $100,000.
Oh, wow.
Right? Yeah. It's a pretty high barrier there. Then on top of that, you got to find a facility. You got to secure the facility. As you said, it's an all cash business, so it's very difficult to make sure that it's really secure. You can't insure the business because most insurance companies don't have the legal right to do so. So there's this very large upfront expense and a fairly significant risk factor that you have to undertake. And it takes a lot of money to get there. So it becomes a unique entrepreneurial problem. On the one hand, I'm excited about it for entrepreneurs that can get into the business. I think a lot of money is going to be made here because this business is probably going to become as big as the alcohol business. But on the other hand, getting from here to there, there's going to be a lot of headaches, a lot of legal issues. You're going to spend a lot of money on lawyers. You're going to spend a lot of money with taxation. You're going to spend a lot of money with the government authorities. I saw a really good program about a fellow that was a producer in California. She was very excited about the fact that they legalized marijuana in California because he'd been producing illegally in the northern part of the state. So instantly his plants now could be legal. Wrong. When he went to register and get his permits, it cost him $80,000, and they came in and destroyed the plants they originally had because they were planted when the product was illegal. He had to start over from scratch, growing all new plants. They restricted the number of plants that he could grow, and it became so difficult for him to try to sell the product to a dispensary, the guy ended up selling it direct, which at the end of the day was illegal because he wasn't going through a dispensary. So here we have this entrepreneur who was operating an illegal business, put up a lot of money to make his business legal because he could, basically, but he didn't have enough to get to the end game. He falls back, starts to operate illegally again because now he's selling directly, but then starts bragging about how big the margins are, which is obviously true because he's cut out distribution and he's cut out the taxation, right? So it is really important that our entrepreneurs plan much more extensively if they're going to get involved in this industry.
Yeah, I see that. And I was working with an entrepreneur here in town that initially had a technology for being able to identify the health of the plant. And he actually pivoted to eventually wanting to create a marketplace for data regarding almost like if you consider a trading house for data on different yields and, that people can subscribe to. Now, if you think about this, and you mentioned this earlier, this has the ability to be as big, if not even bigger than alcohol.
Right.
And the hundreds of billions of dollars of that industry when it comes to the production, distribution, advertising, I mean, it is everywhere. So I think it's smart for people to see this as an emerging market, but there's lots of pitfalls when it has to do with the value delivery, right? I mean,
right, the value delivery system. We talk. I'm a big one on this. These programs of talking about how we get fixated on the value delivery system, and we forget what our value proposition is. Here we have a market where people pretty well know what the value proposition is. I'm out there to help people enjoy their evening, help them enjoy their afternoon, perhaps alleviate pain. The multiple reasons that people use cannabis. So they recognize the value proposition, and they're pretty good at thinking up a product that fits the value proposition. But what's not there is the value delivery system, because all the government did was put a bunch of restrictions in place. They say, okay, it's legal, but here's a bunch of restrictions, without saying how to solve the restrictions. They say, oh, we'll leave that up to the entrepreneur to do. And so what does that mean? It means that your entrepreneur has to have far more money, more resources in order to go out and try this. And as we learned, when you set up a value delivery system, if you don't get it right, that's an expensive mistake. If you go off and you buy the equipment to fill you rent a dispensary, buy the building or rent it. That's a big upfront cost. Then you've got to have the equipment inside the dispensary, right? You got to display your product, and you've got to be able to explain the product to people. So then you've got to have employees in this dispensary that are handing out the product. You have to have security at the dispensary to keep people from robbing you, since it's an all-cash business, and to keep people from stealing your products. So you have to have security. So there's a lot of cost, a lot of upfront cost to getting into this stuff.
There is. And, if you look at the larger investment groups, I've had a few conversations with some private equity folks, and what they've told me is that everybody's waiting.
They want everybody else to make the mistake, right?
Yeah, everybody's waiting. The money's on the sidelines.
So I went through a review of a bunch of dispensaries here in Las Vegas, because again, that's a definite trend. I'm tracking this trend. I want to know what's going on. And there are dispensaries here in Las Vegas that are at least 50,000 square feet. I mean, they're huge. They have a lounge where you can sit. They've now legalized lounge consumption, by the way, so you can actually buy the product and consume it on site. I don't think any other state allows that. But anyway, they built the lounges so you could come, be comfortable, big, wide open areas. They're just very, very large facilities that can accommodate a lot of people. On the other end, there are dispensaries that are inside a strip mall where the space in which they're selling the product isn't probably much more than about 150 square feet, right? Yeah. Very, very different value delivery system at that point of final sale. And so does one sell better than the other? That's where your buddy who's collecting data, that's what we really need to start finding out. You say people are waiting. Okay, what are they waiting for? Find out. Are these really big facilities able to bring in a lot more people? Are they able to sell at a higher price? By the way, my observation in the dispensaries was that the larger ones, the product was more expensive. Right? When you would do a price comparison, and frequently the same brands were sold in multiple dispensaries. As you got into the higher end dispensaries, the higher end environments, meaning they're larger, they got more furnishings in them, they have spent more on lighting, they've spent more on entertainment like music, televisions. There, the product cost was higher. Okay, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because are the customers wanting the lowest price, or are customers wanting an experience when they go in to shop? And we don't know. So this is where, again, if you make a mistake in the value delivery system, it's really costly. I mean, even the processing of these products, it's expensive. If you're growing it legally, then you've got to have controls around your product so that people don't come and steal it. You have to register it. So a lot of times these are grown in greenhouses. That's expensive building that you have to put in. A lot of times you have to have climate control, create the right amount of moisture. So that's one end of it. California, perhaps you don't have to do that, but then once you harvest the product, you have to refine the product, right? Now we're talking about equipment that can easily cost $50,000 to $100,000, as you said, and you have to have a facility for it. What's the right optimal size? Should you have a little operation that's making, a small amount of product to sell in a local environment, or is this something that's going to become like, big brands, like Seagram Gin or Sky Vodka, and therefore you need to be processing it much bigger. And what's going to happen with the brand? Can I just sell the product under an obscure name like marijuana 123, and I put in there what all the chemical composition is of the product, because it's like consumers pay quite a bit of attention to the chemical composition. So can I just call it 123, put it out, and sell it on the product itself, the contents of the product? Or do people want to see a brand, like, oh, this is the flavor rate marijuana, and it has a logo and it has an icon, and perhaps it has a celebrity endorser, or they might just reduce distribution or tighten up, try to make it exotic in some way or another.
Well, we talk about
expensive value delivery system questions.
Sure. And, we talk about these trends that are sort of coming like a freight train, and oftentimes we ignore them until somebody else doesn't.
Right.
And it picks it up and goes from there. And see, for me, I have a bit of a contrast. So I grew up on a border town. My stepfather was a Border Patrol agent. So he was constantly in the face of the illegal drug operations. He'd bring home Polaroids of bales of weed and this and that. And then, contrast that to 30 years later, here I am touring a Class A, beautiful, scientifically, the plate, you walk into this grow facility and you think you're like on the moon. It's just insane. You walk in and there's just this fields of all these individually tagged plants, and there's people in scrubs and bunny suits it was incredible. And I got a chance to talk with a scientist who knows how to do all the genetic side and cultivate, and they have this kind of very special light that makes it more bitter or more this or more that. It was just incredible. So I think about all the things that have happened in, say, the wine industry, where they've taken these sort of boutique wines. They've got the big boys, of course, right? The Gallos of the world. But you have these boutique bodegas and others that have these, very specialized. And of course, behind you is a bunch of wine there. But overall, what's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years? Will there be a celebrity endorser? Is Snoop Dogg going to be the spokesman for one of these brands?
Right. Right. Well, again, so get back to what we don't yet know how people are going to choose to buy the product. In the past, they didn't have a lot of choice, right? The old distribution facility was the guy on the corner, and he had what he had, right? And perhaps you got to where you trusted the guy on the corner and you thought he got good product. That might have been how you established the quality of the product in the day. Now that's all changed, right? And so now this is one of the things that really fascinated me, was going in and seeing all this different product. And then saying, why? Why is there so much different product? And then people starting to explain to me the chemical composition. And I'm like, why? Why is there different chemical? Why would I care about the chemical composition? And then getting more information about how that's supposed to affect your experience was all, very interesting to listen to. But what nobody could do is tell me, how do consumers want to make the selection, right? Do they want to get that involved in the product? Do they want to know what's in it? I don't know what's in most of the products that I consume, to be quite honest. It's I don't have any idea how they make lime flavored vodka, or, I just know it's vodka and they did something to it, right? Yeah, and I primarily rely on the brands, because the brands that I've known to trust were the ones that I enjoyed consuming. Right. So and I think that's where a lot of people, the MBA types, are saying they think the market will head. It's going to become a branded product and branded dispensaries. Yep. And of course, they like that idea, because the more you can push that idea, the more you raise the investment cost. So you have to have a lot more money to create a brand. You have to have a lot more money to set up these big dispensaries. And so people that have business degrees, who think they have contacts that they could raise a lot more money, want to make it happen that way. They don't want the little specialized bodega down the street, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to try to push to say that, hey, if you really want this, for this to succeed, we need to create the supermarket or the very large environment, and we need to create the multiple branding, and the brands need to stand for something.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of my friends that are teetotalers and don't drink, and they asked me, like, what's the appeal of wine? You know, it's hard to explain why I appreciate wine and why a $50 bottle of wine is usually better than a $10 bottle of wine. And so and I'm much the same way. I don't know exactly how it works, but I know that there's a difference. And I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for entrepreneurs and even the bigger companies that are on the sidelines to create uniformity in the market. And, the goes back to, this is a little bit why this topic's interesting, is because it's different, because the value is there. Value deliveries is what we're looking at teasing out here. Can you think of any other markets that are similar, that have had to more focus on the value delivery versus the value itself?
Well, actually, look again, the same problem was confronted by Tesla. And when they went to market, instead of going and selling through the existing distributors, they went direct to the consumer. But the origination of the company was to not only create a product, but then to create a brand around the product, the Tesla brand, which has a meaning, and then to create their own distribution, which was direct sales, and then to create their own charging station distribution environment so that people could get away from the fear of the running out of battery when they're on the roadway. And one of the reasons Tesla made that work was they raised an enormous amount of money. I mean, they went to the public markets and they raised money in equity, they raised money as debt, and they took a lot of money for Tesla to get from origination to the company we know it is today. And so I think this is what the entrepreneurs have to keep in mind. If you think you're going to get into the cannabis business on the cheap, be very careful. Be very careful. You don't want to end up like the fellow who's put a lot of money into it. He's got some cannabis in his hands and he doesn't have distribution. Or you don't want to be in the position where you're in distribution and you're struggling to keep inventory in place because you don't have enough cash flow to keep the inventory keep inventory in place, or you're not able to draw customers into your dispensary because they've gone to a different buying experience, right? So, and then if you don't know how to sell it, because how do we know? Are people going to just say, I like that brand, like I said, or are they going to, how much explanation will you have to give the customer? Will each customer at each experience, how many of those will need 20, 30 minutes? When I was in the stores talking to these salespeople, I was eating up 20, 30 minutes of their time and then not buying anything at the end of the day. So, I mean, that's very expensive, right?
Yeah, there it is. And when the experience I had, and very similar doing research and trying to figure this out, the staff, they're extremely knowledgeable. They know all the chemical compounds and why the sativa and then whatever, I forget all the different strains, but they know all these things, and it's almost like they study it and then they consume it. But like you mentioned, they are potentially overlooking the most important element of all this, and that is the consumer, the market itself. How are they going to make those purchasing decisions?
Right. Right. I mean, so I was looking at, for example, they have consumables, right? You can have a honey that has cannabis in it, has the chemicals in it. You can get candies. There's a lot of ways that you can consume the product that way. And they also have it that's available as creams where you can like rub it on your skin. And I'm asking people, what's the difference? And there's not really good descriptions about what the difference is. More like, hey, you're here, buy it, try it, see what you like. And it's all personal taste. And I'm kind of like, well, that's not a good way to get me to buy, right? I don't know what I'm buying. It's a new market. I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't quite know how. I don't want to be experimenting with the product. So how can I figure out what I want, between all these different options? And it can become overwhelming. I mean, it truly can become overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. And it'll be interesting in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, how this all shapes out. And
one of the things that I think is important for our entrepreneurs here is if you stick with the 4 big trends that we know are driving the next 10 years, mobility, asynchronous behavior, intelligent products, adding artificial intelligence, and the gig economy, you can find a lot of opportunities to get out there and make things happen that where you're identifying the unmet need and you're one of the first to market. Okay. What this trend is a definite trend, but think about it, it's not on any of those four things that are driving growth in the next decade. This is really a trend that started a long time ago. The consumption patterns are out there. We expect the consumption to grow, but it's really an old market that's just been legalized. So entrepreneurs are jumping into something that's really, it's not something new, and it's not being built on exciting trends with lots of new innovations happening. It's really more of a slugfest. You know, who's going to get in there and make the product? Who's going to be able to refine the product, distribute the product? And that slugfest takes resources. And you need to be you need a lot more than product knowledge in order to be successful at this, right? There was a lot of people got in the car industry that never made it. There were a lot of people got in the soft drink industry that never made it, right? I mean, remember Royal Crown Cola, RC? Yeah. That's a brand that's pretty much gone now, right? We see that a lot of people that started didn't have the resources because it was a major mass market that went to a lot of people, and therefore branding became important, distribution became important. The value delivery system side of this, developing that was very important, and it took a lot of resources to get there. And I think our entrepreneurs need to be very careful when they think about this. What slice of the business are they going to play in, and do they have the resources to play, especially in something that can change this quickly and can be affected by changes in regulations.
Exactly. Well, this has been a very insightful conversation, Adam, and looking forward to continued conversations.
Thank you, Manny, and I hope you have a good one.
Take care.